Legalization of same-sex marriage in the Netherlands, 2001, the first country to do so. Introduction. A landmark moment in the fight for LGBTQ+ rights. In 2001, the Netherlands made history by becoming the first country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage. This groundbreaking move was a monumental step toward equality and social justice for LGBTQ+ individuals. It not only signaled a profound change in the way society viewed marriage but also set a powerful example for other nations to follow in the ongoing struggle for LGBTQ+ rights. The legalization of same-sex marriage in the Netherlands marked a pivotal moment in the global movement for civil rights and human dignity, influencing future policies and public perceptions worldwide. 1. The LGBTQ+ movement in the Netherlands, a long history of advocacy. Early LGBTQ+ activism in the Netherlands. The history of LGBTQ+ rights in the Netherlands dates back several decades before the landmark legalization of same-sex marriage in 2001. In the mid-20th century, the Netherlands saw the emergence of LGBTQ+ advocacy groups, such as Culture en Ontspanning (CO) and the Dutch Union for Homosexuality, NVSH, which campaigned for the rights of gay men and lesbians. By the 1970s, LGBTQ+ activists were pushing for greater visibility, acceptance, and legal protection, with major advancements in gay rights emerging in the late 20th century. In 1998, the Dutch government took a crucial step forward by granting same-sex couples legal recognition through the creation of registered partnerships, which provided many of the same legal rights as marriage, including inheritance rights and tax benefits. However, advocates for full marriage equality continued to push for further reforms, arguing that same-sex couples should have the same right to marry as their heterosexual counterparts. The role of public opinion and political will. In the years leading up to the legalization of same-sex marriage, public opinion in the Netherlands began to shift significantly. Public support for LGBTQ+ rights was strong, with many Dutch citizens recognizing the need for equal treatment regardless of sexual orientation. By the late 1990s, polls showed that a majority of the Dutch population supported the idea of marriage equality. Politically, the Dutch government had long been a proponent of progressive policies, with a history of championing human rights and social liberalism. The country was already known for its progressive stance on a variety of issues, from drug decriminalization to euthanasia laws. The political leaders, including members of the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy (VVD) and the Labour Party (PVDAG), supported the campaign for same-sex marriage, reflecting a broad consensus across the political spectrum in favor of equal marriage rights. 2. The path to legalization, the role of Dutch Parliament. Introducing the same-sex marriage bill. The push for full marriage equality in the Netherlands gained momentum in the late 1990s, spearheaded by advocacy organizations such as COC Nederland and prominent politicians who advocated for LGBTQ+ rights. In 1999, the Dutch government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Wim Kok and his PVDAG-led coalition, introduced a bill that would allow same-sex couples to marry. The bill was supported by various political parties, including the PVDAG, the VVD, and the Green Left Party. The Dutch parliament debated the issue for over a year, with various opinions being heard. Opponents of the bill argued that marriage should be reserved for heterosexual couples and that the traditional family structure should be upheld. However, the Dutch parliament ultimately voted in favor of the bill in 2000. The legal challenges and legalization process. Before the bill could be enacted into law, it went through the formal legislative process, including a vote in the Dutch Senate. But the Senate approved the measure in 2000, and on December 19, 2000, the Netherlands officially became the first country in the world to pass a law allowing same-sex marriage. The law was scheduled to take effect on April 1, 2001, and included full legal rights for same-sex couples, including the ability to adopt children and access the same inheritance and tax benefits as heterosexual couples. The passage of the bill marked a historic moment in the fight for LGBTQ+ equality worldwide and showcased the Netherlands' leadership on human rights issues. 3. The historic day, April 1, 2001. The first same-sex marriages. On April 1, 2001, the Netherlands officially became the first country to legalize same-sex marriage, and it didn't take long for couples to take advantage of the new law. The first same-sex marriage in the Netherlands was celebrated by Gert Kasteel and Dirk Ubbels, two men from Amsterdam. They were among the first to legally marry in a civil ceremony at City Hall in Amsterdam. A total of 2,000 same-sex couples were married in the Netherlands on the first day that same-sex marriage became legal. This historic event was celebrated as a monumental step in the fight for equality, not just in the Netherlands but across the globe. The legalization of same-sex marriage was met with a mixture of celebration and pride by LGBTQ+ communities, both in the Netherlands and internationally, while conservative groups expressed disapproval. Nonetheless, the symbolic significance of the event was undeniable. 4. The global impact of the Netherlands decision. Setting an example for other countries. The Netherlands' decision to legalize same-sex marriage had an immediate and far-reaching effect around the world. The country's progressive stance on marriage equality served as a beacon of hope for LGBTQ+ activists and advocates in other countries. Following the Dutch legalization, several other countries began to seriously consider the issue of same-sex marriage, including Belgium, 2003, Spain, 2005, and Canada, 2005. Over the next 2 decades, a growing number of nations would follow the Netherlands' lead in legalizing same-sex marriage, including landmark decisions in Argentina, 2010, France, 2013, the United States, 2015, and Germany, 2017, among many others. Shifting public attitudes toward LGBTQ+ rights. The success of the Dutch initiative had a ripple effect on public opinion worldwide. As same-sex marriage became legal in more countries, attitudes toward LGBTQ+ people began to shift in many societies, with greater acceptance of LGBTQ+ rights, including issues of adoption, employment discrimination, and hate crime protections. The Netherlands' decision to legalize same-sex marriage also played a role in shaping international human rights discussions, positioning marriage equality as an essential element of gender equality and human dignity. 5. Challenges and continued advocacy. Ongoing efforts for LGBTQ+ equality. While the legalization of same-sex marriage in the Netherlands was a groundbreaking achievement, the struggle for LGBTQ+ equality continued. Although marriage equality was legalized, many LGBTQ+ individuals in the Netherlands still face challenges, including social stigma, discrimination, and barriers to LGBTQ+ adoption rights. But the battle for equality continued with efforts to address issues such as transgender rights, equal employment opportunities, and the fight against hate crimes targeting the LGBTQ+ community. Advocates in the Netherlands and worldwide continue to push for global LGBTQ+ rights and work toward the full acceptance and equality of sexual and gender minorities. A legacy of equality and progress. The legalization of same-sex marriage in the Netherlands in 2001 was a pivotal moment in the ongoing struggle for LGBTQ+ rights worldwide. It symbolized the triumph of human rights, equality, and dignity over discrimination and prejudice, and its impact was felt far beyond the borders of the Netherlands. But the Netherlands' leadership in advancing marriage equality helped to pave the way for many other nations to follow, contributing to the broader movement toward global LGBTQ+ acceptance. As we reflect on the landmark decision, it's clear that the fight for equality is far from over, but the legalization of same-sex marriage in the Netherlands will forever be remembered as a landmark achievement in the pursuit of a more just and inclusive world. Arab Spring, 2010 to 2012, a wave of social uprisings for democracy in the Middle East. Introduction, a call for change. Between 2010 and 2012, a series of unprecedented social uprisings swept across the Middle East and North Africa in what came to be known as the Arab Spring. Fueled by deep-rooted dissatisfaction with authoritarian governments, economic hardships, corruption, and widespread inequality, millions of people took to the streets demanding greater democracy, freedom, and social justice. The Arab Spring symbolized a collective cry for change in a region long dominated by oppressive regimes, and it would forever alter the political landscape of the Middle East. In the span of just a few years, countries like Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Yemen, and Syria saw mass protests, revolutions, and even violent uprisings that toppled long-standing leaders. Although the outcomes varied across the region, the Arab Spring marked a dramatic shift in how people in the Middle East approached political reform, human rights, and governance. 1. The roots of the Arab Spring. Social and economic discontent. The Arab Spring was not born overnight. It was the culmination of years of social and economic frustration across the Middle East. Key factors included high unemployment, especially among the youth, who were often educated but had few opportunities for stable employment. Rising food prices and poverty, which disproportionately affected the working and middle classes. A political repression, with long-standing dictatorships suppressing political opposition, curbing freedom of speech, and maintaining tight control over the media. Corruption within government institutions, which many viewed as the root cause of economic problems and inequality. A limited political freedom, with many of the region's leaders coming to power through undemocratic means and maintaining power through force and manipulation. In particular, Tunisia, a small country in North Africa, became the birthplace of the Arab Spring after the tragic self-immolation of Mohamed Bouazizi, a street vendor who had faced harassment from local police. His act of protest against police brutality sparked mass protests, which quickly spread across Tunisia. A catalytic moment, Tunisia's revolution. On December 17, 2010, Bouazizi's self-immolation galvanized public outrage and led to widespread protests across Tunisia. The government's response was brutal, but the protests only grew stronger. But within a month, President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, who had been in power for over 2 decades, was forced to flee the country on January 14, 2011, signaling the fall of one of the region's most entrenched dictatorships. Ben Ali's departure marked a significant victory for the Tunisian people, and the successful overthrow of the government became a powerful symbol of hope for others in the region who were seeking political change. 2. The spread of the Arab Spring. Egypt, the fall of Hosni Mubarak. Inspired by Tunisia's success, millions in Egypt took to the streets, demanding the removal of President Hosni Mubarak, who had ruled the country for nearly 30 years. The protest movement was led by a broad coalition of youth activists, labor unions and political groups, united under the banner of the January 25th Revolution. The demonstration centered around Cairo's Tahrir Square, which became the focal point of the protests, with millions of Egyptians demanding democracy, freedom of expression, and an end to corruption. Despite the government's violent crackdown, the Egyptian people persisted. On February 11, 2011, Mubarak resigned, and the Egyptian military took control, promising a transition to democracy. This moment was seen as a historic victory for the Arab people. Libya, a civil war for freedom. In Libya, protests erupted against the authoritarian rule of Muammar Gaddafi, who had ruled the country for over 40 years. But what started as peaceful protests quickly escalated into a full-scale civil war, with anti-government forces fighting Gaddafi's loyalists. Gaddafi's brutal response to the protests, including the use of military force against civilians, led to widespread international condemnation and intervention. In March 2011, the United Nations authorized a military intervention, and NATO forces began airstrikes against Gaddafi's forces. After months of fighting, Gaddafi was eventually captured and killed by rebel forces in October 2011, leading to the collapse of his regime. However, the conflict left the country deeply divided and unstable, and Libya's political future remained uncertain. Yemen, a struggle for change. In Yemen, mass protests erupted against President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who had ruled the country for nearly 33 years. The protests in Yemen were driven by dissatisfaction with political corruption, poor economic conditions, and the lack of basic services. After months of protests, Saleh agreed to step down in November 2011 through a peace deal brokered by the Gulf Cooperation Council. Despite his resignation, Yemen descended into a political crisis and eventually a civil war, with competing factions vying for power, including the rise of Houthi rebels. 3. The challenges and legacy of the Arab Spring. Syria, from protest to civil war. While some countries experienced regime changes, the outcome was far more tragic in Syria, where protests against President Bashar al-Assad's regime turned into a devastating civil war. In 2011, protests erupted in response to the government's violent crackdown on peaceful demonstrators, and soon the situation escalated into a full-scale war. The Syrian civil war became one of the deadliest and most complex conflicts of the 21st century, drawing in multiple international powers, including the United States, Russia, and various regional actors. Despite the international outcry and efforts to find a peaceful resolution, the war continues to cause immense suffering, with hundreds of thousands dead and millions displaced. A mixed legacy, hope and disillusionment. The Arab Spring brought about significant political changes in the region, but its legacy remains mixed. Tunisia emerged as the one success story, transitioning to a democratic government and winning praise for its peaceful power transfer. However, in other countries such as Egypt, the overthrow of authoritarian regimes did not lead to lasting democracy. Instead, military-led coups and a return to authoritarianism followed, as in the case of Egypt's 2013 coup, which removed the democratically elected Mohamed Morsi from power. In countries like Libya, Yemen, and Syria, the uprisings led to civil wars and political instability, leaving deep scars in the region. 4. The international impact of the Arab Spring. A ripple effect worldwide. The Arab Spring sparked political movements and uprisings in other parts of the world. The Occupy movement, 2011, in the United States and other Western countries, inspired by the Arab Spring's grassroots activism, protested against economic inequality and corporate power. Social media also played a key role in organizing and spreading the protests, demonstrating the growing influence of the internet in shaping political movements. Global reflection on democracy and governance. The Arab Spring reignited global conversations about the importance of democracy, political participation, and human rights. While the uprisings highlighted the desire for freedom and self-determination, they also exposed the challenges of establishing democratic governance in a region long dominated by authoritarian rule and deep social divisions. The international community was left grappling with how best to support democratic movements while avoiding the destabilizing effects of intervention in the region. A changing Middle East. The Arab Spring marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Middle East, a moment when millions of people took to the streets in search of a better, freer, and more just future. Although the results were mixed, with both progress and setbacks, the uprisings undeniably showed the world that the people of the Middle East were demanding more than just basic rights. They were calling for a new era of democracy and governance. As we look back on the events of the Arab Spring, it's clear that the struggle for freedom, social justice, and democracy in the region is far from over. However, the bravery and determination displayed during these uprisings will continue to inspire movements for change around the world, and the legacy of the Arab Spring will always remind us of the power of ordinary people to challenge even the most entrenched systems of power. Black Lives Matter Movement, 2013, present focused on racial justice and police reform. Introduction: the birth of a movement. The Black Lives Matter (BLM) movement emerged in 2013 as a response to the ongoing pattern of racial injustice, police brutality, and systemic discrimination faced by black communities in the United States. Sparked by the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, BLM began as a social media hashtag but quickly evolved into a global movement demanding justice and equality. It focused on the need to address police violence, racial profiling, and the broader systemic racism embedded in law enforcement and other institutions. Since its inception, Black Lives Matter has had a profound impact on social justice activism, calling attention to the urgent need for racial equity, police reform, and greater accountability in the criminal justice system. The movement has galvanized millions, spread globally, and sparked nationwide protests, especially following high-profile incidents of police violence against black individuals. 1. The spark: Trayvon Martin and the birth of the hashtag. Trayvon Martin's death and Zimmerman's acquittal. The catalyst for the Black Lives Matter movement came on February 26, 2012, when Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African-American high school student, was fatally shot by George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer in Sanford, Florida. Martin, who was unarmed, was returning from a store when Zimmerman, who believed Martin was suspicious, followed him. After a confrontation, Zimmerman shot and killed Martin. Zimmerman claimed self-defense and was not immediately arrested. In July 2013, Zimmerman was acquitted of second-degree murder and manslaughter charges, a verdict that sparked outrage and a national outcry. In response to the acquittal, 3 women, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi, created the hashtag Black Lives Matter, which quickly spread across social media platforms as a call for justice and an end to racial violence. The power of social media. The hashtag Black Lives Matter quickly gained momentum, becoming a rallying cry for people seeking to address racial inequality and police violence. Social media became a key tool for organizing protests, sharing stories of racial injustice, and highlighting cases of police brutality. The movement's decentralized structure allowed activists to communicate, organize, and mobilize without a central leadership, making it accessible to a broad range of people across the United States and internationally. But the hashtag transformed into a movement, with activists organizing demonstrations, engaging in direct action, and calling for policy reforms. 2. The growth of Black Lives Matter, key events and moments. High-profile cases of police violence. As the Black Lives Matter movement gained traction, it was fueled by high-profile cases of police violence and killings of unarmed black individuals. Michael Brown, an 18-year-old black man, was fatally shot by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, on August 9, 2014. Brown's death and the subsequent Ferguson unrest sparked widespread protests. The phrase, "Hands up, don't shoot," became a symbol of the fight against police violence. Eric Garner, a 43-year-old black man, died on July 17, 2014, after being put in a chokehold by a New York City police officer during an arrest. Garner repeatedly said, "I can't breathe," before losing consciousness and later dying. His death, and the subsequent failure to indict the officer involved, sparked national protests and led to calls for greater police accountability. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old boy, was shot and killed by police officers in Cleveland, Ohio, on November 22, 2014, while playing with a toy gun. Despite the officer's quick use of deadly force, the incident raised questions about police interaction with young black children and the dangers of racial profiling. Nationwide protests and civil unrest. The tragic deaths of Martin, Brown, Garner, Rice, and others led to massive protests across the United States. In Ferguson, protests grew into civil unrest after the lack of indictment in the case of Michael Brown's death, and the Ferguson unrest became a defining moment in the BLM movement. The protests in Baltimore after the death of Freddie Gray in police custody in 2015, and the protests in Charleston after the Charleston church shooting by white supremacist Dylan Roof in 2015, further emphasized the urgency for justice and the fight against racial inequality in America. 3. Key goals and focus of the Black Lives Matter movement. Racial justice and police reform. At its core, the Black Lives Matter movement focuses on achieving racial justice and police reform. Its central demands include ending police violence against black individuals, particularly the use of excessive force and racial profiling by law enforcement agencies. The accountability and transparency in police actions, with a focus on police reform policies, including better training, the use of body cameras, and improved community police relations. A reform of the criminal justice system to address the disproportionate incarceration rates of black Americans and dismantle systemic racism. Equality and human dignity for black individuals in all areas of life, including education, housing, employment, and healthcare. Intersectionality and inclusivity. The BLM movement has been praised for its intersectional approach, recognizing that racial injustice does not exist in a vacuum. The BLM highlights the intersectionality of race, gender, sexuality, and economic status, acknowledging the unique challenges faced by black women, LGBTQ+ individuals, and those from lower-income backgrounds. The movement has also focused on issues such as black queer rights, economic justice, and the right to education, ensuring that the fight for justice includes all marginalized groups within the broader black community. 4. International impact and global solidarity. Beyond the United States, a global movement. Though the Black Lives Matter movement began in the United States, its reach quickly expanded globally. Protests, demonstrations, and solidarity rallies were held across the world, from Europe to Africa to Asia, with activists and allies expressing their support for the struggle against racial injustice and police violence. The BLM movement's message resonated with other marginalized groups fighting against oppression and inequality, contributing to broader global calls for racial equity and social justice. The role of social media in global activism. The hashtag Black Lives Matter became a tool for organizing international campaigns and raising awareness about racial injustice. Social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook allowed the movement to share stories of racial violence, foster global connections, and mobilize people to take action in support of racial justice. International figures, celebrities, and activists also lent their voices to the cause, helping amplify the movement's message. 5. Challenges and controversies. Criticism and backlash. The Black Lives Matter movement has faced criticism from various sources, including political opponents, media outlets, and law enforcement. The critics argue that BLM promotes an anti-police agenda, painting law enforcement with a broad brush of violence and corruption. Some detractors mischaracterize the movement as being anti-cop or violent, despite the fact that BLM has consistently advocated for peaceful protest and nonviolent direct action. The term All Lives Matter, which emerged in opposition to Black Lives Matter, is seen by many as an attempt to dismiss the specific issues faced by black people, further underscoring the systemic racism that the movement seeks to address. Internal challenges and movement sustainability. As a decentralized movement, Black Lives Matter has struggled at times with maintaining clear leadership, organizing strategies, and resources. Yet despite this, the movement has continued to grow, with local chapters around the country and new leaders emerging to take up the cause. As some critics have also raised concerns about the ability to sustain the momentum of the movement over time, especially when faced with setbacks in policy reforms and the criminal justice system. 6. Achievements and progress. Policy and legal changes. The Black Lives Matter movement has succeeded in shifting public discourse about police brutality and racial injustice. As several cities have adopted police reform measures such as the use of body cameras, banning chokeholds, and implementing better de-escalation training for officers. The movement has pushed for greater accountability and transparency in law enforcement, leading to increased scrutiny of police departments across the country. BLM has also brought attention to the need for criminal justice reform, including advocating for the reduction of mass incarceration and the abolition of practices such as cash bail. Cultural shifts. The Black Lives Matter movement has also sparked important cultural shifts in how race and inequality are discussed in American society. Public awareness of the realities of racial profiling and police violence has been raised significantly, and conversations about institutional racism have become more mainstream. The movement has influenced popular culture, politics, and media, and Black voices are now being more actively included in conversations about social change. A continuing struggle for justice. The Black Lives Matter movement is more than just a slogan or a hashtag. It is a global call for justice, advocating for an end to racial violence, systemic discrimination, and police brutality. But while the movement has faced significant challenges, it has succeeded in raising awareness, changing public discourse, and pushing for policy reforms in law enforcement and the criminal justice system. The road to racial justice is long and the struggle continues, but the Black Lives Matter movement has proven that when people come together and demand change, they can shift the very foundations of society and make the world a more just place for future generations.